Today, Project Veritas published leaked whistleblower footage of an internal meeting at one of the biggest tech firms in the world, Salesforce. In the meeting, several high-level executives are talking about how they can't allow messages that have the potential to incite political violence. Around the same time as this meeting, Project Veritas notes that they received a notification from Salesforce saying that they were terminating services to Project Veritas. I'm not entirely sure what Veritas may have said that has the potential to incite political violence. And what's really being said here is that the ideas that we have, that you have, that may run contrary or contradict the mainstream narrative have the potential to incite violence. Therefore, you will be severed from a massive customer relations management service. Salesforce, I guess the easiest way to explain it, it's customer relationship management software, basically a database of all your customers, and it's kind of like how Patreon is. If you have customers who are purchasing from you on a subscription basis, or you want to know their information when they buy from you, you have this software to do it. For someone like Project Veritas, that they're probably getting monthly or yearly contributions, they need this customer information. Getting this cut off would be like Patreon, in a sense, banning someone, which we've seen in the past. Now, a couple years ago, Patreon banned Sargon of Akkad, also known as Carl Benjamin, of the Lotus Eaters podcast. Outright, with no warning, overnight, his income was gone. But at the same time, they allow many left-wing accounts to remain up. When this happened, it was considered to be a blip in the culture war because, look, one guy on YouTube losing his revenue was not the biggest deal in the world. It was interesting. But Salesforce, with 150,000 clients, so they say, saying outright that they're going to shut down conversations that they feel have the potential to incite violence. Not that directly incite, but the potential to, means one very simple thing. What we're going to be seeing with this move is that one of the biggest tech companies in the world is basically saying, if you like Project Veritas, if you would say the things that Veritas says, which are not over the top, then you will be removed from their services. This means that all of the leftist information, all of the misinformation from the Democrats about Russia or the Black Lives Matter lies that incited extremism and violence in the streets, resulting in over $1 billion in damages, was overlooked and will be allowed to continue. This is possibly one of the most consequential bits of evidence proving censorship against conservatives. I mean, we know Twitter is doing similar things as well, but this is going to have dramatic economic ramifications for anyone who tries to communicate with their customers certain ideas. In the end, conservative ideas will end up crippled and removed and economically restricted, while left-wing lies will be allowed to persist. You know, I'm not gonna just stop there. I've got the receipts. I'm going to show you. There is a poll and data showing the left believes outright lies about Black Lives Matter and police and brutality and things like that. And that contributed to a wave of mass violence across this country that was never addressed by any of these firms. They're only taking action against Trump supporters and conservatives. Now, by all means, feel free to hate Trump and all of his supporters, but I am simply pointing out there is a political bias and disparity in all of this. So let's read about what Project Veritas released, and I'll show you some more data about what's going on, explain to you Salesforce. But before we do, head over to timcast.com and become a member because, well, we're all facing the purge. Many accounts are getting suspended. Steven Crowder was recently suspended. As I mentioned, Carl Benjamin, he recently got a strike on his YouTube channel. So we have set up timcast.com. We do not use Salesforce because we are trying to insulate ourselves from this purge. But we also have some very amazing bonus full podcast episodes that you can only get at timcast.com. Seriously, go there, become a member. It's how we are trying to create the safety net in the event that we do get banned. But don't forget to like, share, subscribe, tell people about what's going on with this. Seriously, share this because let me break it down for you. Why this is so dangerous. Here's a story from Project Veritas. Mind you, Veritas is considered by NewsGuard to be failing to adhere to basic standards. But they do say Veritas does not repeatedly publish false content. That's a very important rating. I also think that the assessment of Veritas is unfair and incorrect. Project Veritas publishes undercover video and leaked footage or undercover video showing people saying things. The complaints on the left are that it's out of context. but most news organizations do similar things. We have I believe it was Channel 4 in the UK, or there was a UK British channel that published undercover video as well, and that's deemed credible. Sorry. If they put out footage, then I'll comment on that footage as it is, and you can clearly see what these people are saying, and it's backed up by the fact that they actually banned Veritas as well. Here's the story. Leaked insider tape reveals Salesforce's plan to deplatform, quote, broader range of customers who have, quote, the potential to incite politically motivated violence. Salesforce inexplicably severs ties with Project Veritas. Now, you may be saying, Tim, okay, look, banning this stuff, this potential for violence, it has to be done. We can't allow people to, engage in incitement of violence. Let me show you a tweet. In a story from Engadget, they've highlighted a tweet from me. I said, I don't think this even matters at this point. Time magazine just came out and said a cabal of elites rigged the election. From Time magazine said that. I'm sorry. They said they didn't rig the election. They fortified it by changing the rules and laws as well as manipulating the flow of information. This story is real. Most of you have seen it. Twitter said this claim of election fraud is disputed, and this tweet can't be replied to, retweeted, or liked due to a risk of violence. What violence? I literally just mocked Time magazine, who wrote this story. The secret history of the shadow campaign that saved the 2020 election. In it, they literally say cabal, elites, conspiracy, all that stuff. I was mocking them. What risk of violence is there? We've long heard. The left has said words are violence. You know what that means? It was only a matter of time before they would try and use their manipulation of language to take down political ideas they don't like. That's been the game. We have been warning about this. You need to understand this may be the most serious confirmation of censorship coming our way that we've seen. This may be, in my opinion, one of the biggest stories Project Veritas has ever published. Who cares if Twitter says you can't say dumb words? Fine, whatever. I think it's a problem, right? Because we need to have political discourse. But what happens when Salesforce, one of the biggest companies in the world, mind you, not just tech companies, who is in between a business and its customers, says, we will remove your ability to interact with your customers if you say things that we think could potentially incite or lead to incitement of violence or lead to politically motivated violence. Yet they ignored all of the riots of last year. The right is going to be hobbled. They're going to lose resources and revenue. I'm warning you all. It is only going to get worse if this kind of thing continues. But let me read the story for you. They say Project Veritas released a new video today, leaked by a Salesforce insider exposing company executives adhering to cancel culture mentality following the events at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th. Salesforce executives were recorded on January 13th. On their website, Salesforce states they are the world's top customer relationship management platform with over 150,000 clients. Salesforce alleges they bring companies and customers together. That allegation is now worthy of some serious questioning. I appreciate the snark, Veritas. Brett Taylor, Salesforce's president and chief operating officer, said that what happened in Washington, D.C. on January 6th has forced the company to rethink how they do business. Quote, since the events of the 6th of January, I think one of the things that really impacts Salesforce is the national conversation about the role of technology in inciting that mob, disseminating misinformation, and fomenting extremism. What we've done in light of the events of January 6th is recognize a much broader range of messages have the potential to incite politically motivated violence, he said. Taylor specifically mentioned Salesforce's contract with the Republican National Committee when he explained some of the changes. We've engaged with the RNC to communicate that no messages on behalf of President Trump and no messages questioning the validity or integrity of the election are allowed on our platform under the guidelines that they may incite violence given the escalated conditions in the U.S. right now. We're looking across our customer base to make sure our technology is not being used by businesses or platforms that are inciting political violence. Did Donald Trump incite political violence? No, but they'll tell you he did. Trump said peacefully and patriotically march to the Capitol. Some people, befuddled and bewildered, walked in, but a lot of people did engage in abhorrent behavior and fight with cops. It was nasty stuff. What are they saying? They are taking a leftist view of what it means to incite violence. They are ignoring a year and $1 billion+ in damage from all of the riots from the left. Do you think in the future they're going to consider language that might incite the left to extremism? I would say no, because we already know that look, here's what happens. These people probably believe the same lies as everybody else. In fact, even conservatives, according to new data, believe lies from the mainstream media about the police. No joke. And I got the receipts to prove it, but let's read more. They say, Taylor's statements leave room for questions about whether or not journalists who expose incontrovertible evidence of voter fraud in 2020 will now be deplatformed by Salesforce. In the same internal meeting, Salesforce Executive Vice President of Government Affairs, Eric Loeb, said the platform would specifically target politicians that objected to Biden's certification. We are pausing all PAC contributions. The pause or suspension certainly includes the suspension of any contributions to members of Congress that voted to object to the presidential certification. I want to stop and address that previous statement as well. There is proof of, I shouldn't say that. There is strong evidence of voter fraud. Notably, the AG in Texas arrested a woman. That does not mean that the election was cheated or stolen or anything like that. It does not. I want to make sure that's clear because I think a lot of people jump the gun. Even Matthew Brainerd, who I've had on the IRL podcast, has been very precise in his language, saying potential illegal ballots. Now, this woman who was arrested is innocent until proven guilty, so we'll see. But Project Veritas, who reported on that, saw themselves get notification that they were being severed from Salesforce. Take a look at this. James O'Keefe's tweeted, Salesforce has yet to give Project Veritas a reason behind their business decision to sever ties with us. We've been a Salesforce customer since 2014. And then he says hashtag Salesfarce. Listen, Salesforce has the right to do business with whoever they want. The problem is they tell you, these companies say, don't worry, you're allowed to do these things. It's fine. Political speech is fine. And then abruptly they change the rules on you. What this means is that now conservative groups, those on the right, are going to be scrambling to find an alternative before they get terminated from Salesforce, meaning it could potentially destroy all of these businesses. I mentioned that thing about Sargon, Carl Benjamin. Overnight, Patreon banned him. And all of the people who were his customers subscribing to his exclusive content, all of a sudden were outraged. They lost their connection to someone they wanted to support. Carl lost his income overnight without warning. Salesforce has 150,000 business customers. This isn't just one guy on YouTube. So sure, they're allowed to do it. But this is a major, massive escalation in the bifurcation, the hyper-polarization in this country and around the world, probably. The funny thing about what Salesforce is saying in this video is that they're trying to avoid the potential for violence, but all they're doing is guaranteeing that it gets substantially worse because these people aren't smart enough or they're doing it on purpose. But let me explain. If you target only conservatives and they are forced to create their own parallel economy, there is nothing keeping people together. I like that show from Penn and Teller. It's called BS, though they use the full word. There's an episode where Penn Jillette says that what ended war between France and Britain after hundreds of years, mind you, was trade and economics. The opportunity to, make money, put it simply. Many business interests in the UK were like, we've got powerful ways to make money by being allied with France, so we might as well do that. Economic ties brought them together because there was a benefit for everybody. And they're like, hey, actually, when we're not fighting, we're actually thriving. What happens when the inverse occurs? Not the forming of economic ties, but the separation of them. If Salesforce says they're only going to service, they're not going to service those who might hold opinions they don't like because of the potential for violence, then you'll see conservatives do what they're doing now. GoFundMe bans basically anybody who's conservative or anti-woke, so people create their own versions of GoFundMe. Financial institutions are doing the same thing. People are going to start building their own financial institutions. Gab builds their own infrastructure. Over the past couple of years, conservatives have been building out a parallel economy, and I warned about this several years ago. What Salesforce is doing now may be the most extreme iteration of it. I am seriously worried about this. Let me read a little bit more, and then I'll explain to you the big problem. They say Salesforce recently informed Veritas they will end the current working relationship, stating that it was a business decision. Veritas asked Salesforce for clarification on this matter, but it has not been provided. Veritas's new chief technology officer, Michael Schaefer, consistently attempted to work collaboratively with Salesforce, but was ignored up until the moment that Salesforce sent the email announcing the end of its relationship. Quote, I don't understand what Salesforce's business decision is based on. We are a customer that pays like clockwork and has required very little in return for our loyalty. We have to wonder if we were cut off because we caught some big tech executives telling the truth recently and exposed that truth to the public. According to The Street, Salesforce is expected to report its Q4 2020 earnings on Thursday, February 25th. Shareholders will have the ability to question executives on the company's recent policies. Okay, look, I can respect you not wanting an escalation of hyperpolarization. I can respect saying, yo, we need to bring people together. But Salesforce is not doing that. Now, I want to make sure I'm being reasonable and fair. They said based on what they saw on the 6th, they're taking this action. So they very well may be honest and may look to the lies that are disseminated in media that result in left-wing extremism. But why should I believe that? More importantly, I'm going to hold them to, figuratively, the fire to make sure that they do what they say they're going to do. Let me show you some data. We talked about this last night on the IRL podcast, but I think it needs to be brought up in this context. Zach Goldberg says, in a recent nationally representative survey commissioned by Skeptic Mag, asked respondents to estimate the number of unarmed black people killed by police in 2019. Overall, 44% of liberals guessed 1,000 or more, as compared to 20% of conservatives. This calculation is based on crosstabs shared with me by the researcher. Okay. Conservatives are wrong. 20% of conservatives believe it's about 1,000. So we have very conservative and we have conservatives. And then we can see that among moderate individuals, they believe it's about 100, 40%, a plurality. Among liberals, a plurality says about 100. And among very liberals, a plurality says about 1,000. That is absolutely incorrect. Take a look at this. In another graph, we see in 2019, what percentage of people killed by police were black? Conservatives said 37.8. Very liberal said 60.4. So let me simplify. 60% of very liberal individuals believe, I'm sorry, that's incorrect. Among very liberals, they believe that 60% of the people killed by police are black. The real number is 23.4%. We talked about this. Listen, if I believed that the police were killing, minorities at that disproportionate level, I would be out screaming and protesting as well. So I understand why Black Lives Matter protesters are out. And to be honest, I understand the anger of Antifa and Black Lives Matter when they engage in these riots. But don't you see it? It's misinformation. It is not true. The media keeps pushing out these lies that's just not true. They hyper focus on certain stories and it results in a distorted worldview that leads to violence and riots, politically motivated. Will Salesforce ban all of their customers that say this? I think the answer is probably not, for one reason. The people who work at Salesforce, Silicon Valley types, probably believe the exact same lies. The only reason they're going after Veritas is because they believe Veritas is lying. I consider myself to be fairly moderate and centrist. I look at Veritas the exact same way I'd look at any other news organization. If they put out bad information, I'll question them. And there were some things I recently questioned. James, I had him on the show and asked him some questions about a story they did on Mark Zuckerberg. But Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, the people at Salesforce, they're surrounded by a hyper-polarized far left. What they hear in their circle does not represent most of this country. So when they say we have to ban this extremist information, they're not talking about themselves and what they believe. They're talking about you and what you believe. Axios reported this, September 16th, 2020. Exclusive, $1 billion plus riot damage is the most expensive in insurance history. Between $1 and $2 billion, to be honest. Here's the problem. That's actually not the full amount. That's what the insurance paid out. The insurance didn't cover everything. In Minneapolis, for instance, there was a building that was destroyed, and to remove the rubble cost more than the cap of the insurance they had. So what one business said was it's more than $25,000 to clear the rubble. Therefore, the insurance companies only offering $25,000 are not covering the full costs. These numbers are not correct. Many said, I can't afford to remove the rubble on my own. The insurance won't cover it. Business is gone forever. It was lies, a big lie. And I would dare call it the big lie. Why? The riots we saw from the left were the most expensive in insurance history, possibly the most expensive in history. 19 plus people lost their lives, and many others in the periphery of these riots also lost their lives. What happened at the Capitol was extremely bad as well, but for different reasons. I mean, people trying to disrupt the Electoral College vote count is really, really bad for our institutions, and that I get. But come on, in a different way, they're different circumstances. $1 billion+ in damage and 19 deaths directly attributed to the riots is really, really bad. Why did this not prompt a reaction from any of these companies to ban any of this stuff? Why did they wait until January 6th, until after the 6th? So let me explain to you what we're going to see. If these companies only ever react against the right, that means people on the right, people who watch videos like this, are watching these big companies do these things. They know Salesforce is biased. It drives people crazy, feeling like they have no path forward, no path to redemption, that they're being discriminated against, that they're second-class citizens, their businesses are getting purged and destroyed, and they have no way to fight back. Meanwhile, leftist, politicians are violating their own rules and doing whatever they want. I shouldn't say leftist, I should say Democrat. This makes people go crazy. And then in response to that anger, they double down and say, see, this proves it, which is why it's one of the stupidest things in the world for conservatives and people on the right to actually engage in any kind of violence or protest or riot. One of the dumbest things anyone could have done is storm the Capitol, completely delegitimized what little legitimacy the media gave to them and gave evidence to the establishment media and these companies. It gave them the evidence that they were looking for. Very rarely do these media companies call out Antifa. These institutions are dominated by the left. And the escalation against the right it's going to get worse. Matt Taibbi wrote this. I can't stand Fox News, but censoring it might be the dumbest idea ever. How will the latest campaign against misinformation backfire for the country? Let's count the ways. Now, I'm not going to read the whole article. You should definitely check out what Matt Taibbi has to write. But he's pointing out how insane it is that Democrats are actually trying to get Fox News banned. It's not just Salesforce, but you got to understand how big Salesforce is, my friends. 150,000 clients. How many businesses is that? How many small, mid to large companies is that? How many of these companies who are conservative are going to say, please, everybody, just stop talking about what you care about. Stop fighting for what you believe in. Don't say anything that might be considered not left. This is the dramatic escalation. It just keeps happening. Manhattan prosecutors expand their investigation into Donald Trump, now looking into Donald Trump Jr. and Chief Financial Officer Alan Weisselberg. They're not stopping. They're not. Republicans aren't doing anything, but the left just keeps beating people down. And I am telling you, they need to stop this. They won't. What they think they're doing is not what's really happening. Salesforce thinks they're going to stop the escalation. It's what I refer to as the Chinese finger trap problem. You've got your fingers and you want to pull your fingers out, and the more you pull, the harder and worse it becomes. What they need to do is the opposite. It's counterintuitive, but it's the only way to bring people together. What Salesforce needs to do is actually make an announcement about far left lies and right wing lies, or more importantly, just say, dude, you're entitled to your opinions. It is not the business of Salesforce to intervene in customer relations for their clients. They provide customer relationship management software. Why are they now policing speech? Well, so be it. I'll tell you what happens. Someone's going to make a conservative version of Salesforce. People are making conservative versions of social media and conservative creative agencies and production studios. Eventually, you will have two equal and opposite political tribes with different, worldviews. We already have that, but I mean like with massive industry resources. And that's when the serious conflict starts, because they're not going to, they don't care. The people who are on the right tribe, people on the left tribe, there's very little overlap, and neither will agree with either's politician. Eventually, it will lead to just, I don't care what you think. I'm not, people are going to say that they're not going to abide by the rules of that politician. We already heard from the Oath Keepers. Well, it was the founder who said half the country will not view Biden as a legitimate president. What happens then? I'm already hearing that there are jurisdictions that are defying their governors over these lockdowns. Several jurisdictions, or many around the country, are declaring Second Amendment sanctuaries, basically saying, ain't no gun laws here. What happens when legitimacy and confidence breaks down? People are going to snap. And what do you think happens in the next couple of years? Do you think this goes away? Do you think it just stops? From Politico, Mitt Romney says Trump will win the 2024 GOP nomination if he runs. The Utah senator pointed to public opinion surveys that show Republican voters still overwhelmingly favor the former president. Mitt Romney is correct. I think it's funny that he points that out and says, I know most of the Republicans like Trump, but I'm going to defy it. So what are you, a Democrat? He says, well, I'm going to fight for the tiny wing of my party. Bro, it's tiny wing. It's like 5%. What do you represent at all? I guess just not Democrats. But I bring this up because what we're seeing in all of this, the split is here. It's not getting better. It's getting worse. Salesforce just enacted one of the most deranged and dangerous actions we've ever seen. Twitter continues to do it every single day. The most insane, the stupidest and most moronic thing these people can do is force conservatives off their platforms. With conservatives on Twitter, these platforms have the ability to negotiate and leverage that platform against them. They could very easily push the Overton window further and further left without risking any destabilization by simply saying, hey, we're going to suspend you if you say this. And then what happens is conservatives all start self-censoring. What's happening now with the hard excising of conservatives is that many just don't care anymore. Steven Crowder got suspended the other day. He comes back to Twitter and says, I don't care. I'm just going to say it. You're not going to silence me. He's got his own platform. Eventually, there will be no opportunity to influence, compromise, or de-radicalize. These platforms will harden, will grow, and that's it. I started my own website, timcast.com. I promoted it early on. And it's because I think it's very likely that we get banned as well. And then where will all of you go? Well, many people have already left YouTube, for that matter. And YouTube isn't the worst. They're pretty bad. They're trying to get people to self-censor and to guide people to into other conversations. In the end, though, I think the problem that kicked this off started a long time ago, and we're well past the point of mending it. The Democrats in New York are going after the Trump family. What do you think happens if they arrest Don Jr. or Trump? I mean, people are going to lose their minds. We're already seeing Democrats try to get Fox News banned. We're seeing the FBI investigating members of Congress for their role in the January 6th insurrection, so they say. What do you think happens if a sitting member of Congress or Republican gets arrested? The establishment Republican Party is seemingly worthless, as noted by Mitt Romney. But the larger faction of individuals in this country, the working class people, they do not care for the Republican Party as a whole. There are a few Republicans who are populists who represent the Trump faction. They're still there. Those are the ones being threatened. I think it's going to get bad, man. When Patreon banned Carl, it led to this massive intellectual dark web backlash. Sam Harris left the platform. I think Jordan Peterson did. Dave Rubin ultimately left. I left. Well, I should say I left. I still have the Patreon. I just said I'm never going to update it again, but I'm going to leave it functioning. Many created their own platforms. They went to Subscribestar, notably, and then the media and many big tech firms attacked Subscribestar and got them banned from various financial institutions. Salesforce is bigger and more powerful. And this has me more worried than ever. This is really big. This is really big. Some conservative will launch their own version. And then we will see the financial firms, we will see the media smear them, call them far right and evil and all that. And then what happens is Google and Amazon step in and strip the core services from these platforms as well. There needs to be, well, actually, some conservatives have called for a new internet because the infrastructure is privately owned for the most part, and it's owned by leftists of this cult dogma who don't know what they're talking about, who don't read the news, and who believe insane things because the media just lies all the time. And it's really scary because some of these people are really powerful. And this is something I brought up in my 1 p.m. segment. Why won't Elon Musk or Peter Thiel put money into building out this infrastructure and calling out these individuals I guess they do call them out, but Peter Thiel especially, but putting money into news organizations to compete. Complaining is one thing. To be fair, Elon Musk does have Starlink, which is an internet service provider that's coming out soon, hopefully, and that may offset some of the censorship. But we need domain hosting services. We need, Amazon web hosting services. Yeah, we need bigger and better infrastructure. Otherwise, what's happening is this dogmatic cult is taking over. They're inflaming far left extremism. They're refusing to do anything about it, and they're banning you for challenging them over it. I'm worried, but we'll see. Good work, Project Veritas. I'll leave it there. Next segment's coming up tonight at 8 p.m. over at youtube.com/TimcastIRL. Thanks for hanging out, and I will see you all then.